Well, hi there. I got so much hair, it's hard to wear a hat. What do you think? Welcome back to the Coffeehouse. My name is Vic Bonacci. I'll be your barista today as we talk about the 6 thinking hats. You see what I did there. What are the 6 thinking hats and why do we need them? Well, it comes from a book, 6 Thinking Hats, appropriately titled, by Edward de Bono. And in it, what he says is that thinking is a skill that could be improved. And he uses this mnemonic device of 6 different hats to walk us through what he means. So for example, let's say that you and your team, you're trying to think through some problem set, right? De Bono would say that we've got a default mode of thinking, whether we come at the problem emotionally or very matter-of-factly, or maybe we're an optimist or a pessimist. Whatever it is, you're bringing typically one mode, maybe 2, of thinking to it, to the problem set, virtually every time that you encounter a problem. So what he's saying is mix up the different modes of thinking. So you could think of it as parallel thinking is a phrase that he uses in here. When you get multiple perspectives on approaching the problem set. So to illustrate this idea of parallel thinking, De Bono uses a parable of the blind men and the elephant, where you have one person who's describing the side of the elephant as a wall, or someone who's grabbing around the leg and saying, no, it's a tree trunk, or it's a rope at the tail, or the trunk is a snake, or whatever it might be. If you took all the perspectives and combined them, now you might get to see the full picture. It's an elephant, right? So similarly, when we look at our problems, whether it's at work or in our personal lives, what we do is typically have that one fixed, maybe 1 or 2 default positions. And he's saying, no, you want to make sure that you give enough attention to these different modes of thinking. And he says that there's 6 different modes. And by the way, this also is a card from my Agile Coach's toolkit, the 6 thinking hats. And I did a pretty good job here with illustrating the hats. You can find these on the website as well. So the first time I used the 6 thinking hats was actually with a few teams when we were doing this big brainstorming. How are we going to approach this next phase of development from a technical perspective? And what we did was we had a big space, we got a bunch of teams together, and we made posters, and here they are, actually. Lucky you should ask. I've actually still got the posters here, and I'm going to walk you through because the posters, they just take up a lot of space here. So what I'm going to do is just walk you through each of the 6 different thinking hats. The great thing about these 6 thinking hats is that you don't have to use them in any one particular way. One thing that De Bono points out is that you don't want one person only wearing one hat and another person wearing another hat. No. Instead, he says that defeats the purpose. So what he'd like people to do is either rotate the hats around or just have everybody wear the same hat at the same time. Let's walk through the hats. Now, there doesn't have to be any particular order into which hats are worn first, but most people tend to use the blue hat to begin and or end the meeting. The blue hat is all about process. You can think of it as the facilitator, someone who's providing the direction, the guidelines, the purpose of the meeting, what are the processes we're going to use. They're looking at the timing. How many minutes are we going to be using for each hat? They might even organize the thinking or create a plan for action. And certainly at the end of the meeting, it's the blue hat who's making that final determination. Did we achieve our goal or not? And if not, what's our next step? Next up is the white hat. All about information, that's figures, dates, etc. What are the objectives that we're trying to achieve? Is there any missing information? No opinions at this case, it's only data. That's what we're looking for here. How will we get the needed info? Could be another question that comes from the white hat, which is all about facts. Next up is the red hat, and that's where feelings come in. Many times when we're having meetings, brainstorming, having discussions, whatever it is, feelings surface, and oftentimes we think, oh, well, that's a feeling, so we don't need to hear about that. That's too emotional or touchy-feely. No, De Bono says, we want to be perfectly clear that we have the red hat on so that we can describe what the feelings are that we have when we interact with this idea. There doesn't have to be any reasons added at this point. You can rely on hunches, intuition, just off-the-cuff responses that describe each person's emotional connection to the topic. The black hat is very important. It shouldn't be thought of as a negative hat by any stretch. Rather, its importance is reflected in the fact that it's showing cautions, things to be aware of as we're talking through the problem space. So logical reasoning may come really to bear at this point. We're talking about negatives and downsides, difficulties, weaknesses, in other words, dangers. Human minds are hardwired to find out what are the dangers in a current situation. So putting the black hat on makes you look for those very explicitly. Now the yellow hat is the reverse, if you want to think of it like that. The other side to the black coin, you've got the yellow coin. So where black was looking at the negatives, yellow is stressing the positives. What are the benefits? Like the black hat, the yellow hat will also rely heavily on logical reasoning, but it's looking for brightness. Think of yellow as the sun, optimism to black's pessimism. It's really all about finding the value. Okay, if we've got an idea, how can we then deliver this? What is the value? What's the feasibility that we can get out of this idea? Which brings us to our final hat, the green hat. Green is all about creativity. You think about little seedlings that are growing out, right? If you need that mnemonic to help you there. Green is looking at the creative possibilities. What are the alternatives? What new ideas could spring from the discussions we're having? Do we have any hypotheses that we'd like to just throw out there and test? Now these could be solutions to the black hat problems that were surfaced earlier. And then, of course, you'll bring the blue hat back typically to close off a session. So there you have it, a walk through all 6 hats. How would you use it in a meeting of your own? Well, again, you might find it very practical to have different stations around a room if people are physically together, and then just have the group always, metaphorically change their hat color when they're in front of a different placard, a different sign with that hat, instructing them how to use it, what way of thinking they should be trying to reflect on now. Keep in mind that these colored hats aren't specifically assigned to a person, like Phil isn't a black hat kind of guy. He might exhibit that as his default, but rather these are descriptors of the direction that we'd like the group's thinking to go in. Black hat thinking, hey, now we need more black hat thinking on this topic to imagine what difficulties there might be. Or that's enough black hat thinking, let's talk about the yellow hat. Let's put on our yellow hats to talk about some opportunities that we might discover. I wonder if there's any data on that. Can someone throw their white hat on, find some data? How's everyone feeling about this? Let's just quickly put on our red hats and suss that out and get things off our chest. I feel the emotions are coming up here. So whatever hat color you're using at any time, just remember that you want to rotate through all of them to give yourself that excellent view of parallel thinking. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Coffeehouse, the 6 thinking hats. Will you use them with your teams? Let me know in the comments below. Or if you have a favorite default perspective way of thinking, tell us that as well. You can reach out to us anytime you want through the comments or on our website, agilecoffee.com. If you want to hear more about any of the events that we have, agilecoffee.com/events has our full calendar. So until next time, wear your hat and enjoy your coffee with friends.